All right, and we are back. Hi, Tony. Let's have a great introduction. There we go. We can see you. Hi, Tony. How are you?
Hey, Jenny. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Fantastic, fantastic. Neil, how are you? Great to have you with us today.
Thank you. Good morning.
Great stuff. Okay, so we heard from Sharon in our last session. She talked to us about East Africa, safaris, marathons and animals. So you've got a lot to live up to here, guys.
It's hard to match, yeah.
You've got to give it a go. So we're here to talk about NFC and connected packaging, the success stories. But before we get into that, Tony and Neil, I want to hear an interesting fact that not many people know about you. I'm going to go to you first, Tony. Tell us your interesting fact.
Well, firstly, I would like to make it clear that my biggest passion lies with connected packaging, just in case my manager is listening in currently to the webinar. But apart from that, I'm actually quite passionate about Stoic philosophy and Stoic history. And I have been reading, the materials of ancient Stoics like Marcus Aurelius or Seneca, but recently I actually launched my own website that is sort of like a blogging website, thestoicway.net, that focuses on Stoicism, Stoic principles, Stoic history. So that helps me disconnect from work, focus my mind on something else, be creative in the building of the website, generating the content, and I find it really fulfilling as a side activity. So that is my interesting thing.
That really good. Thank you, Tony. Better watch out if you're building websites. Neil, over to you, Neil. Tell us your interesting fact.
Hi guys, I'm Neil from at my IO team, also part of Avery Dennison. My interesting fact, I actually just told this to some of the guys in the green room. Once, a few years ago, I once inadvertently shut down Terminal 1 departures at Heathrow Airport.
No way!
Always makes for a good story down the pub.
Okay, that's pretty impressive. That's pretty large scale.
Yeah.
Okay, and where you found as the culprit, you can tell me another time the long story, but where you found as the culprit?
It was one of the most innocent misunderstandings ever, but I could see where they were coming from 100%.
Okay, so you were identified as the culprit?
Yes, but it was an innocent misunderstanding.
Okay, that's definitely one for another time. Well, thank you very much. Now we can talk about NFC. Tony, we might have some people on the webinar with us today who don't really know what NFC is. Tell us a little bit about that. What is NFC?
Yeah, absolutely. In very simple terms, NFC is nothing more than an electronic sticker that you can apply behind the label, on a product, on a package, to digitally augment the physical product with some videos, with some content, with gamification, for example. And just to paint a picture, imagine that after work, you're in the supermarket, you're staring at a big wall of wine, you have to choose a nice bottle for your dinner later on with your spouse, your boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it might be. And you've narrowed it down to maybe 2-3 bottles. You're not sure which one to pick. There is some pressure, to make a good decision. So you take out your phone and try to get some more information about the brand, about the product. As you're tapping your phone to the different bottles, one of them actually has NFC. So as your phone touches the label, a video engages, a video is triggered, and it tells you a little bit about the brand, where are the vines grown, how is the wine made. By the way, this is the carbon footprint that this bottle, this package generated. It's pretty sustainable. Also, the bottle is from recycled glass. So at this point, you feel much more connected to the brand, the product, you understand it a little bit better. Your decision is made much easier for you. And also, you can use some of this information to impress your partner later on tonight. So you get some bonus points for that as well. And this is really how NFC is used, what NFC is. If you want to go into a bit more technical terms, all NFC inlays have several components, primarily chip, silicon chip, and aluminum antenna. The chip can be seen as the brain of the tag. coding some information about the product or the brand, and the antenna uses radio waves to transmit this information from the chip to a reading device, which in most cases is a smartphone. Basic applications are for consumer engagement or product authentication. And something very important I would like to mention is that NFC is compatible with any modern smartphone. You do not need any specialized equipment to read the tags. You do not need an application to read the tags. And this is a very common misconception. People think that it's very hard to read them or they need something special. Everybody these days has a reading device in their pocket. You just need to take out your phone. You need to have connection to the internet, and you need to touch the packaging or the product itself. And that is everything you need to trigger a digital experience.
Thank you very much. So in a nutshell, we're talking about a small tag which is inserted into the packaging, which a smartphone can read without having to download anything.
Exactly, yeah.
And do you need to have big special smartphones, or is it any smartphone?
It is really any smartphone. And I see one comment here, Jenny, that it might be useful to share an image.
Sure.
So let me share an image real quick so everybody's happy. Hopla. Here we go. As you can see on the screen, this is an NFC tag. This is how it would look like. It's pretty small, it's pretty thin, between 250 to 300 micron. So it's quite invisible when applied behind the label.
Okay, fantastic. And does that smart tag need to have a battery?
It is passive. It does not need to have any intrinsic power source. It doesn't need any battery. And that is the reason why it can be so thin, actually.
Perfect. Well, thank you. I think we have a clearer idea now of what NFC is. Obviously, we were talking about QR codes. NFC is a different way to be able to activate that experience. What do you think the trends are showing us? We heard about what's happening in East Africa, but you guys are a bit more Europe based. So tell us a little bit about the trends in Europe. What are you seeing?
Well, personally, I quite agree with Sharon. She said that everything is becoming much more digital. We're relying on our smart devices more and more. But actually, it's interesting to pose the question, have you actually considered how much are we reliant on our smart devices and on the digital space? And if we take our smartphones as an example, they have a tremendous impact on the way we communicate, the way we search for information, and even how we experience everyday events. And if you're not convinced, just think what will happen if you go on a trip, maybe on a holiday or a business trip. You're at the airport right before security, and you remember you forgot your phone at home. Most likely it's going to be a disaster. I know for myself, I'm probably going to have a small panic attack and I would have to cancel the trip. And that just goes to show that we are extremely reliant on our digital devices these days. And actually that way of thinking extends over to our consumer behavior as well, which is one of the major trends that we see in the market. People would like to shop for their favorite products or interact with their favorite brands from anywhere and at any time. And that usually happens through their smart devices, smartphones and tablets. And in fact, what the statistics show us is that about 80% of all sales are either influenced by online research or completely done online. And we're moving more and more towards that trend, especially now after the COVID season that we had. So yeah, this is one of the major trends that we see in the market, Jenny. This, of course, opens tremendous opportunities for brands to generate more value to the markets they serve, simply by offering more digital experiences to their customers, right? And NFC, for example, is a great, simple yet reliable trigger for these digital experiences. Of course, there are other connected packaging solutions out there as well. But also this trend opens tremendous opportunities for other players in the market, such as converters, such as system integrators, to differentiate their portfolio and to ride this growth wave that we're seeing in the market with connected packaging.
Neil, see?
So thanks for the segue, Jenny. So first of all, guys, just to take a step back to let you know what am I doing on this call, what is Atma.io, and then how does it mesh in to what Tony and Sharon in fact said earlier on in the call. So what we're talking about here is giving packaging a life, a digital identity. And whether that be through NFC or through a QR, what we are doing is uniquely identifying that this wine bottle, using Tony's experience, but it could just as easily be this T-shirt with the swing ticket on there, whatever it may be. We are using technology to give a passive, a non-smart product, a digital identity. And that's the concept that I really want you to embed through for what I'm going to explain now, because we live in this world, this IoT world where everything is connected. And Tony, I love your example of going on holiday and the stuff hitting the fan because you've left your phone. 100%, my COVID pass is on there, my boarding pass is on there, my Amex is on there, and it wouldn't be happening. And that is an easy thing to do for one of these, because we are effectively walking around with computers in our pockets. We drive a computer. We have all of this processing power, which is native, which is embedded into most of the things around us. But when we need to make that bridge, make that leap across into a piece of packaging, the only way to do that is to give it a digital identity. And NFC and the adoption of that is going to be key, is going to be crucial to how businesses start to manage, to understand, and to better get value from their supply chain, so that they can give better customer experiences when they get into the shopping center, how we actually communicate around carbon footprint, how we are showing that there's going to be a circular economy, and not just talking about it, but actually auditing it. There is legislation that is coming through in the next 8 years. It's EU driven, but the UK is still part of it. Sorry, part of the legislation, not part of the EU. Another story, which is going to be, it's called the Coulthard Agreement, which is what the UK follow. And it's all about how do we show that things like single-use plastic is no longer going to be a thing? How do we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 50%? And how do we reduce water stress? So this is a very long answer to your question, but what is the trend? The trend is legislation. We are going to be, as companies, we're going to have to prove that what we say, that we are sustainable, that we are tracking, we're going to have to prove that. And things like our credit worthiness, literally when we go to the bank and say, we want to take out a business loan, how credit worthy you are is going to be very soon pegged to how much good, bad, or indifference you are doing to the environment. What is the trend? The trend is that this is happening. What I say to our customers is, or potential customers is, if this isn't on your radar, if connected packaging is not on your radar, it needs to be, because 8 years isn't a long time, and you can't get there and then find, oh, sugar, we are in trouble. So to take another step back or a step up, depending on how you want to imagine it, what the heck does Atma.io do? So once we have these connected products, and we actually want to say it started life as this raw material, pulp. It then got transformed from this pulp into a sheet of paper. That sheet of paper then had some adhesive applied to it. It had an NFC embedded into it, and it then went off to Gordon's gin. That bottle was then taken from somewhere which is 50% recycled, and then a label got applied. How do I see all of that connected supply chain? How do I know all of those transformation events? Who did what? When did they do it? Why did they do it? When did it get shipped? How do I connect all of that so that when the consumer scans or reads the NFC and gets a carbon footprint output, what am I calling? What database is giving me this holistic view of what's happened? That is what Atma.io does. So I work hand in glove with Tony to evangelize this story. And the future is now. This is happening. Brands are already engaging with this. And the ones who are not, I'm hoping, are on this webinar or are going to watch it and are going to say, okay, this is happening. 8 years is not far away. The length of these projects, you know, knock off another year, so that these discussions need to be happening sooner rather than later. You're on mute, Jenny.
Thank you very much, Neil. I did go on mute because I needed to listen and make sure I didn't interrupt you, because you were definitely on your trend there. So fantastic. No, really good information. I mean, 8 years, as you say, is not a very long time at all when we're talking about, you know, companies being able to move and large brands being able to move and being able to change process and have this worked out, signed off, and then actually activated. So yeah, I absolutely agree with you. 8 years is not a long time at all. So there's a lot of trends there. So one, of course, being around use of phones, and the second, of course, the trends in terms of legislation. Tony, we've got a question, a couple of questions actually from the audience, which I think might just be quite nice to drop in here before we get into case studies. There is a quick question here. It's about, could you tell us how much data could actually be stored in a chip? And I don't know, maybe it's also to Neil there.
Yeah, absolutely. I can answer briefly. Usually the chips have about 128 bits of memory, which does not sound much, but you also don't need that much. What we usually encode in a chip is a URL that links to an online platform. That is where Neo comes in with the Atma story. And actually all the product information, all the brand information is held in the cloud, in servers. So all you need to encode in the chip is something very simple that would make the exchange of information very brief. And as I said, all the further connectivity happens in the cloud.
So really, the chip, again, is just our mechanism, our bridge to get us to where all the information is then held in the cloud.
Bridge is the perfect term, and that's one that I will use probably too much, but it is that bridge between the physical and the digital, and then NFC is what allows that to happen.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. A quick question in from Carl, and I think this is to you, Neil. The 8-year deadline, is that then a lawful requirement for world packaging, or was it European that you said?
So, Carl, apologies, because I work in Europe. I know that it's European legislation. I don't believe it's worldwide, but don't quote me on it. I would need to look into it.
Okay, that makes sense. Tony, we've got somebody asking here for some photographic images, and I know you like doing some screen sharing, so I don't know if you private note there between us. So, I don't know, is there anything you could share? I'm sure that's music to your ears.
Yeah, I love my slides, Jenny. That is very true. Well, I shared the slide where there was an image of an NFC. I can share it again. And actually, I can also transition to a different question further down. Are NFCs easily duplicated and counterfeited?
Yeah.
I think we can take both of these more or less in the same time. So let me. This is an image of an NFC tag. As you can see, here is the antenna. The chip is somewhere here. It's a very small grain of silicon, grain of sand. And that antenna would be on some kind of a PET carrier, either transparent or opaque. And it is very small. This particular tag is about 28 millimeters in diameter. And they're pretty small, as I said, pretty thin.
Yeah, you don't notice it within the packaging at all, really.
Correct, yes. And to the next question, is it easily counterfeited? I would like to say that NFC is not new. It is not a new technology. It has been used for more than a decade already in the banking industry. That is how it was introduced to the market. And the primary use in the banking industry is for secure contactless payments. Chances are your credit card or debit card has an NFC tag. Also, some other common applications are for access control. For example, your hotel room key has an NFC, your car key has an NFC with a rolling code. So the code changes every single time, so nobody else can open your car. And long story short, what I'm trying to say here is that NFCs are very secure. That is their primary application in the market. And in the other applications outside of the banking industry that we're using them for wine and spirits or cosmetics or something else, this is the primary benefit that NFC brings on the table. We can leverage some cutting edge technologies such as cryptography, such as tamper evidence, for example, to secure the brand image, to monitor gray market activities, and to make sure that the product is original. For example, with wine and spirits, that the liquid is original or that there is original product in the packaging in general.
So actually, it's pretty good in terms of authentication, but also, therefore, it gives you the ability to know that you're talking about something which is secure as well. So it's not easily duplicated in any way, really, is what you're saying.
Correct. Yeah, it is not very easily duplicated in any way. This is also one of the main aspects that differentiates NFC from QR codes. In the previous presentation, Sharon taught us a very interesting use case, how you can use QR codes. And of course, the product there was water bottles, that is, cartons. So that is a very cheap product, very simple product. And it makes perfect sense to use NFC. But if we're talking about more luxurious, more expensive products where counterfeiting and fake products are a problem for the brand, then NFC makes a lot more sense.
Tony, let me just jump in there, if I may, to do a quick ATMA plug as well. So we add another layer to the authenticity part around NFC also. So 100% of the what we call digital triggers, so barcode versus QR versus NFC. NFC is the most secure. What we do also through the cloud data capture is using the luxury brand example that Tony just gave. Sat within the ATMA IO hub, we have certified suppliers, factories, shippers, receivers of, I won't use a company, but of an expensive brand's product. By each time that NFC and embedded, just to go a little bit further on what is encoded into that NFC, we have a short URL for customer redirect for the brand experience, similar to what Sharon discussed. But then also within that 128 bits of memory is what we call an electronic product code. And we can think of that like DNA. There are the chances of 2 EPCs being the same in the world is about 1 in 300 billion. So the chances of 2 of them being the same are almost 0. So ATMA IO captures each time a new NFC tag is printed or encoded, it then sits in the ATMA IO hub. We can then say that it was seen at this factory and that factory is certified for Neil's handbags, tick. It was then shipped, received at the DC, which again is certified, tick. And it now exists not just in Selfridges, but Selfridges in the UK, which is where the tax was paid for this expensive handbag, not Selfridges in Dubai, which has a different taxing element. Therefore, we know that it's not just the genuine handbag, but it's where that handbag should be. So it's not grey market, so that things like warranty are still intact. And all of that is is what is capable when you are capturing these unique EPCs or NFC encoding inside the Atma IO hub. And each time we call it a handoff or a handshake of we expect it to be here and we've seen it, then the authenticity confidence goes from 0 when it's created to 100 by the time I have engaged with that NFC tag in Selfridges in London versus Selfridges in, I think they have one in Dubai, I don't know, but in Dubai.
Okay, that makes good sense. A couple of quick questions actually about the NFC tags themselves. Are they water resistant? Can they be embedded in clothing? And can they be applied to any type of material?
I love the questions, by the way. It's a very active crowd, which is always great to see. To answer these questions, NFC tags are water resistant in the sense that the inlay and the chip are sandwiched with some of our products in a PET between two PET layers, so the water doesn't have any impact on the actual tag. That being said, you cannot read it if it's submerged. Liquids absorb radio waves, so the tag needs to be fairly dry to be able to read it. Of course, if you apply it on a bottle of whiskey or on a bottle of wine, for example, you would have no issues reading it. The problem is if the tag is submerged underwater, then it would probably be impossible, but also I doubt that you would put your phone underwater as well. So it's not a common use case, let's say.
But what about washing? Because I think what we've got here is a question from Tom, which is referring to embedding it in clothing. So I'm assuming he's saying if I wash those, or if the consumer washes those clothes, will that NFC tag still work after it's been through the washing machine?
It will still work, obviously not forever. It's a very harsh environment. The tag gets a beating, but we do have some strong constructions. If it is in clothing, it's probably going to be sewed in, so we won't worry about adhesive. It will still function after maybe 10, maybe 20 runs through the washing machine, depending also on the intensity of the washing. But at least for a while, it will survive and it will work perfectly fine.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We've got another question here from Carl. What's the smallest size available? I mean, you talked about a very small, did you say 18 millimeters?
Well, one of our most used tags, the Circus, it is actually a benchmark in the industry, is 18 millimeter die cut size, but we have actually smaller inlays. Maybe our smallest one in the portfolio, in our portfolio, is 10 by 17 millimeter. So still fairly small.
Mm-hmm. Super small, really. Okay, there was a question a little bit earlier on from Sonia, which was around the main differences between QR codes and NFC, and obviously each has their place. Tell us a little bit about the differences.
Yes, absolutely. One of the main differences I already spoke about, and this is the security features which NFC brings on the table, and also Neo gave a very good representation of what is happening behind the scenes. So definitely that is the main one. In addition to this, NFCs use radio waves to communicate, to connect to the phone, right? So they can be inserted behind the decorated label of the product or within the packaging even. And what that means is that the NFC does not take any real estate from the label. And when we're talking about luxurious products, very expensive products, the design of the packaging, the design of the label is very important. And brands usually hire artists to design the label in a very particular way. So in many cases, having a QR code sitting there is really a no-go. In these cases, NFC is a perfect solution because it can be, as I said, nearly invisible. And the third way, or the third main way NFC differentiates from NFC or from QR codes is that it is very easy, very intuitive to use. As I said, every modern smartphone has NFC enabled. You do not need to take a picture, download an application. You just touch your phone to the label, to the product, and that is it. And with QR codes, what we see is that in certain circumstances, for example, if you're in a club, you're trying to read a QR code on a bottle, it's dark, maybe there are flickering lights, it might be difficult to read the QR code. Also, if there are any imperfections on the label, maybe some scratches, that could mean it's also difficult or impossible to read the QR code. And with NFC, we can overcome all of this. So these are the main three I would list: security, the fact that it doesn't take any real estate from the label, and the ease with which it can be read.
Okay, so you might say there's a difference in also which product makes sense for. I saw a question, and there's so many, I'm literally trying to scroll through. I saw a question which was around costs. I now can't see it anymore, but I think there's obviously a difference there. Yes, sorry, I assume there's an extra cost and time frame and a cost to the label manufacturer. That was in from Carl. So I guess there's a cost between those two as well.
Yeah, of course, we cannot be comparing, the price tag of an NFC and a QR code because the QR code is just a bit of ink. At the end of the day, the NFC product is much more complex. It's an electronic product. And I can tell you as a rule of thumb, an NFC tag costs between 10 and 15 cents, euro cents. But that being said, we're seeing the price dropping with the increased use of NFC tags. We can leverage economies of scale, which makes the tags much more available, much cheaper. Also, Avery Dennison is heavily investing in companies that are developing new technologies, disruptive technologies. And one of them is Pragmatic. And Pragmatic is developing flexible electronics, which are essentially NFCs that do not have a silicon chip in them. And the silicon chip is actually 2/3 of the cost of the tag. So once these products are out in the market, which should happen fairly soon, we can see the price of NFC drop quite a bit. And I think that would be the start of the avalanche of the adoption of this technology.
So you might want to say then, I suppose, if it's a very low value product, a QR is a better match. But then for kind of luxury, you talked about wine, for example, those products would benefit more from their NFC.
On item level use, I would say the product should be above 30-40 euros to put an NFC tag.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's really useful information. I'm going to continue with the questions from the audience. Can the data contained in the chips be changed later?
Yes, it can if you want it to be. So when you encode a tag, you can lock it. So only the person that has the password can change that information. You can also permalock it. So basically nobody can change that information. And what we see with products being sold on the market, obviously you don't want everybody to be able to change that information. So the tags are either locked or permalocked. And let's not forget that what you encode in the tag is just a link, and the information is actually in the background in the system, and you can always change the information in the system. So actually the same tag can show different experiences, different information, also depending on if I'm reading the tag for the first time, for the second time, for the 10th time. So I'm not seeing the same information every single time. It's quite a dynamic application that you could have.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, because again, if we think about it, it goes back, this is the bridge. So unless that bridge needs to change, it's more about the content afterwards. A question in now, which I think is potentially coming back to when we were talking about the NFC being in the washing machine or whatever, from Wajahat, why would one want to invade privacy after the product's being sold?
That's an interesting posed question. And here the point is not to invade anybody's privacy. And I would give you an example, a real case example, how a tag has been used after the product has been bought and how it brings more value to the customer actually. We had a case with jerseys, basketball jerseys in the US, and the embedded tag actually gave information, what is happening in the locker room of the team. So every time I'm scanning the tag of my favorite team, I can see new updates. What is the team up to? How are they training? I can get some content which is not available anywhere else online, but I can see it because I bought the jersey. And that adds value to me as a consumer. It makes me feel closer to my team. And that is why you would want the tag to be readable after the product has been purchased. Obviously, you can always take the tag out or smash it with a hammer if you're very concerned and you don't want to use it afterwards. But there are some situations, some cases where it makes a lot of sense to actually keep the tag and to keep on using it after the product has been purchased.
Yeah, bit aggressive there, Tony. but all good. And also, maybe the information includes things such as instructions for use, or you know, some AR type of experience showing where to line things up if you're thinking about construction material or something like that. So I think there's a lot of really interesting information that can be available to consumers before purchasing the product, but also after. But good. Neil, I've got one for you. Tom wants to know, are you using blockchain to store all the steps in the supply chain from raw materials to the end product?
The short answer is no. In the true sense of blockchain, an immutable ledger, which is shared across a multi-node network. And forgive me if I'm throwing out a load of jargon.
Oh, Neil, you obviously threw too much jargon. Your internet connection is letting you down. We might have to come back to Neil. Yeah, I think we will. Tony, I'll throw another question to you. Is it possible to carry out
that information? Basically, everyone who has that information to agree is correct. Therefore, change. Sorry, am I okay?
Well, I think you freaked out your computer with all your jargon.
No, do you know what it was? Someone was. I'm hotspotting through my phone, and someone called me. So what we actually use is a distributed network. So the information exists in several different locations. I don't know how many, but it's certainly more than 5. Mainly because we service the whole globe. So if one data center were to go down, no drama, it exists in another 4. But the short answer is that it's centralized. So yes, if our chief technical architect did want to change the raw material makeup, he could, he wouldn't, but strictly speaking, it's centralized, therefore it is not true blockchain technology. Just last piece on that, we do partner with blockchain businesses, but blockchain providers, should I say. So if an immutable ledger is required, which typically in food it is not, but I can see a use case maybe in pharmaceutical, then we do have that option to add that layer in as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Good learning there, I think, for everyone. There's another question here from Jesus, and he wants to know, is it possible to carry out a reading on an automatic packaging line or massively, as with RFID technology?
So just to make it clear for everybody else in the audience, I think what Jesus means by RFID technology is UHF RFID technology, which is ultra high frequency, being able to read the tags with maybe 2, 3, 4, 15 meters distance. So NFC is meant to be read from a very short distance. Obviously, if I'm reading one bottle, I don't want to be scanning the bottle next to it. So the short answer is no, you cannot read in such a bulk as with UHF. That being said, if you want to read a box with several items in it, maybe 5, maybe 10, depending on the items as well, if there is a lot of metal or a lot of liquid, that could be difficult. But with fairly RF transparent products, you could have a number of products within a box, and you can read every single product with the right equipment. What is the right equipment? Big enough antennas, maybe also a reading tunnel. That would be the best, because you have essentially an RFID chamber isolating the noise from the environment, concentrating the reading in a single point. And also it depends what kind of NFC inlays you're using. My recommendation would be to use ISO 15693 or type 5 tags, which have a bit of a longer reading distance.
Very technical, Tony. Very technical there.
Yeah, sorry
Gotta
about
say
that.
you lost me, but okay, thank you. It sounded like a good answer. There's another one here from Manish, who's asking about nano tagans. Again, I'm lost a bit here, but can nano tagans be used as cost effective next generation NFC for ID, for food freshness, maybe helping in plastic recyclability, channelized sorting?
I'll be honest, I haven't heard this term in the market for connected packaging. I know roughly what it is, but it is not a technology that is commonly used. Obviously, nanotagants are very small. I think they're used in forensics in some cases. What we want to do with the NFC is create some connectivity, but we also want to signal to the consumer, hey, there is a connected packaging here. So we also want it to be big enough that people actually realize, hey, there is an NFC here, so let me try and scan it. So I would say I haven't seen this technology being used in the market up until now. Maybe we see something similar in the future, but who knows?
But in terms of being able to trace food freshness, help with recyclability and sorting, surely there should be some possibilities of NFC. I just don't know whether it's.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We can combine NFC tags with sensors. Actually, within our portfolio, we have a product that we call TT Sensor Plus, and its main purpose is to track the temperature, the storage temperature of a product. So you can see, when a product is shipped throughout the supply chain, has it been stored in the right condition, under the right conditions? So you can assume that it has been, it is still fresh when it arrives in the supermarket or wherever it has to arrive. And there are some other products as well, also not NFC, but standard labels or other sensors as well, that monitor the freshness of a product, a piece of meat or maybe fruit, vegetables, whatever it is. So there are some technologies out there that could be used for that application.
Yeah, definitely. Tom's got a question in. I think this one's for you, Neil. Can the content shown to the scanner be different based on the consumer's geolocation? For example, language based on location where the NFC is scanned?
Thank you for bringing me back into the fold, Tom. Yes, is the answer. So if we go back to what is contained within that chip inside the NFC, we've got that short URL, and then we have that serial number effectively. Now, each time that short URL is scanned, we have two options. It can either be dynamic or it can be static. So for your example, it would be a dynamic URL. So the same way when I put in google.com, it looks at my IP address and it says, I'm in the Netherlands right now, but normally the UK, therefore go to the UK version of Google. So it's a static interaction, dynamic interaction. The same thing is possible when we layer the NFC and Atma.io. So that short URL becomes a dynamic one. Because that NFC tag is linked to Atma.io, we say that smartphone is in X, Y, or Z location. And so long as the brand we have worked with has specified we want it to have an experience in these languages, so long as that person has scanned from said geolocation, then that dynamic short URL feeds through to English versus French versus Italian based on where you are. So yes.
Thank you very much. I've got another question because they just keep coming in. Is it possible to use NFC on the inside surface of metal packaging? Would that still work? Would you still be able to read it?
It depends from which side you're reading it. If you're trying to read it from the inside of the packaging, you'll be able to read it. If you want to read it from the outside of the packaging, you will not be able to read it, because metal surfaces act as a shield. They stop radio frequencies. And if there is a box made out of metal, you will not be able to read the tag inside. If you want to apply a tag on a metal surface, we do have specialized ferrite-based inlays that can be applied on the metal surface, and you can read them perfectly fine. Again, as long as there is not another layer of metal on top of the inlay itself.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. What about the information that's loaded in the chip along the way? What about the information? How can we ensure that it's true, that it's authentic, that it's genuine information? That question's from Claudio.
Interesting question, and I'll start the answer. Maybe Neil, you can finish it, looping in the Atma platform functionality. But basically, when a tag is encoded, it is encoded, as I said, with a unique URL. So obviously, this URL cannot be 100% copied. This information is locked in the chip. There could be some, cryptography also leveraged to make sure that, that the consumer is going to the right website, to the right location, and to the right information. The right information is presented to them. So basically, once the chips are encoded and locked, they're fairly secured, and you see the information which the brand wants you to see. And this can be also verified from the back end of the system. And then I'll hand it to Neil to explain a little bit better what is the brand seeing actually from the back end.
Thank you. So, Jenny, forgive me, I'm going to use one more bit of jargon, but I'm going to explain it. So within supply chain, we talk about, I think everyone maybe should be happy with GS1, the global provider of barcodes. They've taken things a step further, and we now have what are called GS1 EPCIS events. And it boils down to what is it, who did it, why did they do it, and when did they do it? So those questions translate into events. And as Atma.io, we capture those events. So the what is it, the creation of it is how this journey always starts. And if you remember back to what I said towards the beginning, we know, because the brand has told us, that this first factory or whatever, this supplier is where this journey starts. This is where this bottle is created. And if it doesn't come from here in Manchester, then we know we have a problem. So how do we know that the information loaded into the chip along the way is correct? Because we build up the confidence, because we know that that event, that what, when, why, fourth one, come back to me, is already being qualified by us. And each step along the way, we are saying, yes, that did happen, handshake, it happened, handshake. So you have that confidence, and you can look in the back end. I can show you very, very quickly how that looks, so that every step along the way, you have that handoff of data. It is all very handily shown to you. Can you see that?
Yep.
Yep, all very handily shown to you with geotags along the way, so that if at any point one of these pins is, this journey, for instance, starts in the east of China, if that first pin where this product was created starts somewhere in Africa or Australia, using this example, we know that although what is encoded may be correct, it wasn't encoded in the right place. So we know we have a problem. So we always work with our digital trigger partners in Avery Dennison, Tony being obviously the person. We just layer on that extra layer of visibility to make sure that what is happening is the actual truth. And that is literally what you would see in the Atma.io hub.
Thank you very much, Neil. Thank you, Tony. We have run out of time. I could give you 2 seconds if you've got one last thing you want the audience to take away with them. There's been so many questions. We've learned so much, but one fact, Tony, one fact or a tip, Neil.
Well, Jenny, I would like to just reiterate the point we started with, that connected packaging is something that we cannot avoid. The future is now. We're going to see more and more connected packaging. NFC is a great trigger for digital experiences, and I was very pleased to see so many questions. If there are people from the audience that want to further the discussion, feel free to reach out to me, to Neil, so we can dig deeper.
Neil.
Not to be boring, but I'm going to echo what Tony said. I always say to my customers, it was only a few years ago that a crazy guy said that cars are going to be driving themselves. They're going to be talking to traffic lights, and you're going to be sat there having your lunch in a car whilst going to work. Okay, we're not quite there yet, but the guy who said that is now the richest person in the world, and we are not too far away from that. The same thing is going to happen with connected packaging, connected products. It is just the next iteration of IoT. Embrace it now, get ahead of the curve, because it will creep up, and when it does, everyone's going to be going great guns, and you're not going to be able to keep up.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Neil. Thank you to our fantastic audience and all the fantastic questions there as well. Again, if you need any more questions, do reach out and we can support there. But stay tuned. In only 4 minutes, we will have our next session starting, and we will be joined by Nathan Anderson, who is the CEO founder at ScanTrust, and Johnny Hobika, who is Managing Director of EPAC Flexible Packaging. And we're going to be looking at disrupting the flexible packaging space. Do stay tuned. We'll be back in 4.
Thank you.
Thank you.